Hello, Global Theater. My name is Gerry Fialka. Today's January 18, 2026. Want to thank Rob Grant and his amazing podcast, I'm Probably Wrong About Everything. Please subscribe. Also want to thank James Joyce for introducing me to today's guest, Igor Belokrinitsky. Is that it?
That is correct. You got it in one.
Where are you calling from?
I am in beautiful San Francisco today. It is nice and sunny.
What's the best thing for a human being?
Uh, this is challenging because the phrasing makes me think immediately of Conan the Barbarian, and he talks about what is best in life. But I don't agree with Conan that the best thing in life is to see their enemy driven before them and hear the lamentations of their women. But it is very catchy. I think realizing your potential and being helpful to others are the best things in life.
Oh, that's good. Potential and helpful to others. But just to go back to Conan, is that a movie or is
Yes.
that a book? That's a movie. So a screenwriter wrote that.
I don't think it was in the original Robert Howard books. I think it's a movie
Okay.
thing. But I may be wrong. It has been a long time since I've seen the movie and longer still since I've read the books. I have seen Arnold Schwarzenegger present once at a conference and on his favorite topic, which is Arnold Schwarzenegger, and he's a fantastic storyteller and presenter.
Yeah,
You
dude,
should have him on.
he rides his bike almost every Sunday on the just off the Venice boardwalk on Speedway with like two bodyguards on their bikes.
That's a picture. I love that.
Igor, what's your favorite form of information? How it comes into you?
I think currently it's Substack. Currently it's reading essays and kind of long form discussions. I prefer following individuals rather than kind of entire publications and news outlets. So Substack is good for that.
Did you become a reader, one, because your parents told you to, two, they did it as an example, or three, on your own?
Uh, they didn't tell me that, but I think in my household when I was growing up, the highest status was accorded to writers. It was kind of considered one of the greatest human accomplishments, and being well read was seen as a kind of very commendable thing. So I knew that it was important. But then once I started, I just couldn't stop. I think The Fellowship of the Ring was the first kind of serious book I read, and then I just couldn't stop.
Beautiful. Why do you think humans collect or gather information?
I think it is partly to be useful to other humans. Um, I think we are, hunters gatherers by nature, and information is just kind of another resource or asset we collect. And I think it's also, trying to get a little closer to immortality, which is the perennial human project, and it is one way to get closer to immortality, even as futile as it is.
Yeah, you kind of answered this, but is this need or want to collect information more innate or more invented?
If it's invented, I feel like it's being reinvented over and over, and it's like one of those inventions that happen at the same time in different places, like calculus. I feel that it's innate. I feel that we just kind of pull things towards ourselves. We use it as a way of sense making in the world. We feel that, at least maybe I find myself feeling that just I'm always one article away from understanding what the hell is going on. So I think it's an innate property of a human is to want to collect, gather information as a way of, again, making sense of the world.
Thanks, Igor. You're concise and articulate. I appreciate your time here, but you slipped in a word there, and I don't know if I heard it or what. Calculus. What is that? Did you say
I
a word?
don't I may have misspoken. I don't think so. No.
Wow, there was a little word that shot in there. I didn't catch it.
Mhm.
Okay, anyways, no worries. It's that Wakian buzz.
Oh, must
Okay.
be, must be.
Yeah. Do thoughts create emotions?
Thoughts are concepts. Emotions are concepts. Uh, I think that emotions are working on a deeper level, like a deeper biological, physiological level than thoughts. And thoughts are kind of us rationalizing our emotions and kind of connecting them to some sort of a structure. But I think emotions are more primary than thoughts.
Fill in the blank. I don't know what I think until I.
Say it. I make sense of things by talking them out loud. I'm one of those people.
Yeah, that's what McLuhan says. I don't know what I think until I say it. Joan Didion says, I don't know what I think until I write it. Can humans think without language?
Yes, because we know that other creatures that are not humans and do not have language, at least in our sense, are able to think and solve mazes and do things of that nature without language. So yeah, I think thought it precedes language.
Chomsky says language is not just words, it's a culture, a tradition, a unification of community, a whole history that creates what a community is. What do you do when language doesn't work? When language breaks down, what do you do?
Language breaks down all the time. I use humor.
Yeah.
I am often in a tense meeting that's loaded and people are talking past each other, and humor helps relieve the tension. Humor helps take people out of the situation so they can look at it a little bit as outsiders and realize how ridiculous it is. And we're all in this room performing this ridiculous conversation. And then you can reset and maybe use language differently. I also try to push for simpler language, for plain English, uh, because sometimes that helps get through better and reboot the language, kind of unplug it and plug it back in again and see if that works.
Really smart. Totally agree with you. Your observations of humans in general, are we more thinking beings or more feeling beings?
Feeling, we're more feeling beings for better or worse. And again, I think then we use thoughts as a rationalization, post factum rationalization for our emotions and our actions that are based on those emotions.
These are two from Alan Turing in the 50s. One is thinking a function of the soul.
Mm. If there is such a thing as the soul, it very well could be, uh, but I don't think it's purely the function of the soul, because I think thinking is also deeply embodied. And so, to the extent that there's a soul and that there's a distinction between the body and the soul, the body very much also participates in the thinking. So, if we accept, again, the premise that there's a soul, thinking cannot be reserved purely to it. It's also a function of the body.
The second Turing question is, can machines think?
Yes, absolutely. They can, they do. They think perhaps a bit differently than we do, but they do think.
Do you more pursue happiness or more pursue meaning?
Uh, the pursuit of happiness is fairly fruitless, even though we are entitled to it. But it is tremendously unhelpful. So probably pursuit of meaning is a more interesting and educational and developing kind of activity for somebody than pursue happiness.
Yeah, I got the question from Viktor Frankl's book, Man's Search for Meaning. He says happiness doesn't tend to last, meaning tends to last. What do you think of that?
Uh, he also, I think, said that it can have meaning if it changes you for the better. So, like any experience, if it changes you for the better, even if it was a terrible experience and an unhappy experience, can be helpful if it is meaningful. I think he knew what he was talking about. And again, I very much agree that our time is better spent in pursuit of meaning.
Does the brain more detect consciousness or create it? Like, is consciousness there bubbling away and we're more so detecting it or more so creating it?
I think we're creating it and constantly recreating it and recreating it and sort of keeping it running. And at night, the brain does other things. And so our consciousness doesn't work quite the same as during the day because the brain is sort of multitasking, and we get kind of our dream logic happening.
What's faster, speed of light or speed of thought?
Well, my thought is clearly very slow today, so speed of light.
I think you're doing great. Audre Lorde, the poet, said you can't dismantle the master's house using the master's tools. Her colleague said you can if you expose the tools. What new tool do you suggest? And it doesn't have to be tangible.
Trying to think through this and which kind of specific master's house we're trying to dismantle. Uh, I feel like our toolkit is fairly limited as humans. We build sort of additional tools for ourselves, and they make us more powerful. But also, I think they're an impediment. I'll quote right McLuhan back at you, since you already mentioned him. Every augmentation is also an amputation. And so I worry as we pick up new tools that we also lose access to some of the things we're able to do without them. And so, again, I worry as we search for new tools to dismantle the master's house that we become less proficient with the old ones and we become overall less functional, um, less self reliant.
Really smart. What's the tool you most gravitate towards? And again, it doesn't have to be tangible.
The framework. I try to organize information. I think that is a very human pursuit. We put things in buckets, we sort things, we tally things. We are concerned with what's in the box or outside of the box. And so I'm extremely interested in ways of organizing information and frameworks, teach a little class on it, things like the periodic system of elements, things like the alphabet. So we have ways of making sense of the world by imposing some structure. It necessarily flattened things and removed some of the detail. And so it's kind of the map and the territory, the scaffolding in the house. But I do find it to be a useful tool because you can frame and reframe a topic, approach it from different angles, get a different view on it, and get some insights.
Super cool. You're smart, dude. What's a toy you gravitate towards?
I fidget quite a bit, so things that I can fidget with are attractive. Things that have a certain texture and kind of feedback that they provide. It's conducive to thought and comforting.
What do you,
Magnets,
oh,
things like that.
like things like
Yeah, fidget
tactile.
things. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, tactile.
exactly.
What do you worry about when you go to bed at night?
I think there's tactical concerns about what happens tomorrow and what I have to do, and who is dependent on me doing my job, my team members, my clients. So there might be work type things, deadlines. And then I think there's longer term, all the problems of the world that you worry about at night, whether it's man-made or natural, whether it's disasters or robot takeover, all the things we kind of all the scary stories we tell ourselves.
McLuhan learned from Ezra Pound that artists are the antenna of the race. They're broadcasting and detecting the hidden psychic effects of our inventions, so we might learn how to cope with what we don't like about our inventions. So, Igor, I asked you the question Marshall probed his whole career. Why do we ignore the hidden psychic effects of our inventions, even though the artists are broadcasting them to us?
I think there's a lot of interference on that line that they're broadcasting. There's maybe other things broadcasting on that frequency. When I was growing up in the Soviet Union, you could listen to the voices, you could listen to like Radio Free Europe and all those stations, but there are also towers that were broadcasting noise on that same frequency, so you couldn't really hear what they were saying. So artists are broadcasting something into the ether and we're tuning into it, trying to listen to it. Sometimes the artists know what they're broadcasting, and sometimes I think they just kind of feel it intuitively. So they may add other things to it that might be noise that's added to that signal.
Yeah.
They may hear something but sort of misperceive it or miscommunicate it. Sometimes, again, other things get broadcast on that frequency. Sometimes we lack the equipment to pick up what they're laying down, to pay attention long enough to understand. And then some people just aren't listening. I think we uh, we have kind of the wealth of human knowledge and art that's been created that is not being consumed beyond maybe the things that are high status or things that we're forced to read in high school, and then we swear never to touch again.
Do artists have moral obligation?
uh, I think artists have a moral obligation to themselves and to kind of their gift to develop it and experiment with it. I don't necessarily think they have a moral obligation to society. Beyond that, I think the ones that get taken over by the moral obligation sometimes, I don't know, they become too grandstanding, and that takes away from the art. I think it's kind of easy to start misinterpreting what you're doing and why you're there if you start seeing that you're actually different, or if you believe that you're different from other people, you're somehow better because you received this gift and you're morally superior to other people. So maybe that's the way to reframe it. They have a moral obligation, but they don't necessarily have a moral superiority.
You're really a wordsmith supreme, dude. I appreciate this again. Are you more afraid of new ideas or more afraid of old ideas?
I don't see a lot of new ideas. I see old ideas being remixed, but I am wary of people who say they have a new idea,
Yeah.
because usually they have reinvented something that has existed for a long time, but they're very excited to tell you about it, and it is often a very bad idea that has been dressed up in kind of some new clothes, but it's still that same bad idea. We keep reinventing fascism, for example, and then every time it's this exciting new idea, let's try this. And
Can you conjure up your earliest memory ever or one of them?
I think the first really strong memory I have, and it's kind of bizarre, and I must have been no more than 4 or 5 years old. Uh, and my parents took me to a circus, which already is a, very overwhelming and traumatic experience to a small child. And I remember that one of the acts in the circus, and this woman came out, uh, and she was wearing a fur coat. And then I think a whistle was blown, and the fur coat actually turned out to be a bunch of, I don't know if they were sables or nutria or whatever they were. There were all these like furry rodents that were hanging off of her, and they all ran to all sides of the arena, and she was just kind of left standing there in the middle of the circus in like her night clothes that were underneath this fake fur coat, and it was magic, and that really stuck in my memory. I think that's the first one. It's things were not what they seemed, and the fur was not dead; it was alive.
Is memory more a curse or more a blessing?
It's a blessing. I generally believe that all information is a blessing, and memory, to the extent that it's information, I mean, it's half information, half imagination. But I think it's a blessing.
Tell me someone within your immediate family who had an impact on you, and what specifically was that impact?
My grandmother was a forensic pathologist. She went to medical school during World War II in the Soviet Union, where I grew up. And then she worked a succession of jobs as a forensic pathologist in hospitals, the morgue, the police. And she had a unique combination of having seen so many dead bodies and so many reasons for people to die and so many causes of death. Whatever activity you wanted to engage in, she probably autopsied a person who died from doing that activity. So she naturally was skeptical of anything you were going to attempt. And yet at the same time, she was the most positive, cheerful, life affirming person that I knew. So this combination of knowing life and knowing death so intimately and still managing to be positive and life affirming and encouraging and loving was pretty unique and special, and I haven't seen anything like that since.
Beautiful. You really painted a beautiful picture of her. Same question outside your immediate family, someone who had an impact, and what was that impact?
So you were asking earlier about kind of any artistic pursuits, and I think the only art I practice with some regularity is a martial art, and so my coach um, is a role model for me. And the thing that in particularly he exemplifies is this unending well of patience. And I see him teaching children, I see him teaching adults, I see myself and my fellow students repeating the same mistakes over and over. And any other human, I feel like, would be just overwhelmed by our inability to know left foot from right hand, and it would just kind of thrown up his hands and given up. But he continues to train us and teach us and be patient with us, and repeating things just until we understand them and internalize them and make our bodies internalize them. And so that to me is a constant reminder whenever I feel impatient with people and feel like, why don't you get this? I've explained it to you so many times. Like, no, we're just, we take a long time to grasp certain things, and there's a benefit to repetition.
It's a real virtue. My mom said, God, give me patience and give it to me now.
This is the opposite of give me chastity and give me constancy, but do not give them yet. Yes, that's a
Who said that?
I think it's Saint Francis or
Saint.
Saint Augustine. My knowledge of saints is
Say the line
insufficient.
again. Give me chastity.
And give me constancy, but do not give them yet.
Yeah, but not yet.
Yes.
I gotta look that up. That's a beautiful one. I need that one. Okay, thank you. Did your parents raise you a particular religion?
No, it was not. I'm Jewish by background, but uh, growing up in the Soviet Union, you certainly could not choose or practice a religion. There was not a place of worship to go to. You could not have a religious text in your house. So as I was getting a bit older, as I was getting into my early teens, that became a possibility, but it was not an option, even if they had wanted to do that. And I think my, at least mother, has found some religion now in her older age, but starting out, they were all good atheists.
Do you pray?
I do not.
If God exists, what would you like God to say to you after you die?
I would not presume to even imagine what kinds of things God uh, would would be capable of saying to me. I mean, I would feel so much FOMO, not like knowing what to ask for. It's he just might tell me 42. So I'd just rather listen. I would
What's what
approach.
is what's FOMO?
I'm sorry, fear of missing out.
Oh,
FOMO
fear of
is
missing out. Oh,
yes.
thank you. Fear of missing out. Oh, good. I learned something. Thank you.
Yeah,
Let's,
it's a an anxiety that people feel that leads them to do things that seem like a good idea at the time.
yeah. Do evil people exist, or does evil use people as a vehicle?
Evil people exist. I think there's a different question around why they're evil and the extent to which it's biological, physiological, cultural, but they certainly exist. As a Ukrainian American witnessing the atrocities perpetrated by the Russian state in Ukraine, there's certainly evil people doing some evil shit, and it's hard to um, say that no, they don't exist, or that there's some abstract evil that is working through them somehow to some unknown ends.
The real hidden question there, Igor, is how do you advise someone to deal with an enemy? And I'll set it up. Alan Watts says, if you acknowledge your enemy, you empower them. Coppola stole from the mob and the samurai, keep your friends close and your enemies closer. JFK said, forgive your enemy, but don't forget their name. And Fellini says, I need an enemy. It's a lot of thoughts. The basic question is, how do you advise someone to deal with an enemy? But first, how would you respond to Alan Watts? If you acknowledge your enemy, you empower them.
Uh, I probably disagree with that. This is a little bit conceptual for me because I don't have any personal enemies. I have failed at finding enemies. I do not have a nemesis. I will say in combat, you certainly want to acknowledge your opponent. You want them to know that you've noticed them. You're aware of their presence, and you will keep them at a certain safe distance. And if they approach any closer, there's going to be consequences to that. If they believe that they haven't been acknowledged, they may feel free to attack you, and feeling there may be an element of surprise. So there's some advantage to acknowledging your enemy. It may, in fact, discourage them from attacking you. Um, so I think it's, again, conceptually, as someone who doesn't have enemies, when I hear somebody describing an enemy they have, I generally encourage them to try harder and have a better sort of an enemy. And to the extent you're kind of defined by your enemy, it needs to be a worthy adversary. And a lot of people that tell me about their adversaries are unworthy of them, and they should aim higher in their choice of enemy.
Yeah, you brought up a couple things there because a young Joycean came to our group. He did jujitsu and judo, and he said his teacher taught him the great warriors don't fight the fight. They don't even get there. But the Chinese proverb goes, "He who cannot agree with their enemy is controlled by them." So to carry it on just one step further, Nassim Taleb said, games were created to give non-heroes the illusion of winning. In real life, we don't know who wins or loses, but we can tell who a hero is. Gregory Bateson says if the criminal gets caught, does he go, whoa, my criminal skills weren't up to snuff? Or does he go, I did something morally and socially wrong? So again, it's a lot of prompts. You can go wherever you want, but the basic question is, does punishment work?
So there's a fair bit. I'm having a hard time with this one conceptually because there's actually a fair bit of literature on recidivism and what happens to criminals. Do they recommit after being released? Do they re-engage in the life of crime after being released? There's fairly different numbers from different countries, different carceral regimes, some of which are stricter or less strict. Uh, Punishment works as at the very least as a deterrence of crime, because when a criminal is incarcerated, it is hard for them to commit further crimes. They can commit those crimes while in prison, but this is less about changing human nature and more just like putting the bad person away from the good people so they can't harm them.
Yeah.
uh I'm not sure it works in terms of reforming a person and releasing them a fully functional and committed member of the society. So I think in that sense, I'm not sure it works. I'm not sure it works as a deterrent to people who are out on the streets, knowing that there's retribution, knowing that there's incarceration, deters a few, but doesn't deter, I think, the majority. There are a lot of crimes that are crimes of retaliation and anger and passion when consequences are simply not considered. And then most violent crime, I think, is committed by young men who are like the dumbest segment of society. So I don't think they're thinking very rationally about consequences.
Yeah. I met a guy on Venice Boardwalk once. He spent most of his life in jail. I says, what is it like in prison? HBO, drug of your choice, and cell phones? He goes, yeah, pretty much. So I know, I mean, that's an unfair generalization, but who knows? So James Joyce was the first projectionist in Dublin 100 years ago, Volta Cinema. He basically checked out. He said, this is stupid. Why should I go inside a building and see a movie of a tree when I can go outside and see a real tree? Years later, William Faulkner said sometimes the best fiction is more true than journalism. Why do we have to recreate things in order to get them? Why do we have to go to a theatrical play of people acting out life? Why don't we just live life?
Well, you already mentioned, was it Taleb, that games are a way for us to pretend like we're winning?
Yeah,
I think a performance is a game,
yeah,
and we can pretend that we can discern good people from bad people because they wear a black hat or white hat or have
yeah.
a particular kind of mustache. We could pretend that justice prevails at the end and everybody gets their just desserts. We can pretend that things happen for a reason instead of randomly as they happen in life. So I think it's a fun game for us to play, a performance, a story, a fairy tale that is much more manageable and sort of human sized, rather than dealing with the vastness of reality.
I like you using the word play and humanized. That was good. Okay, so what was the tipping point of you growing up to pursue business consulting as your calling? What are you studying in high school and college? And is there some point where you go, that's my calling?
I think it was less of a subject and more of a people or persons. I think when I was in grad school, I sort of thought about the person I admired the most in my class. And I talked to her about what her job was and kind of what she did for a living and what that was like. And I said, that sounds like something I want to do. And it also sounded a lot like staying in school because you're doing kind of, you had these study groups and you come together and you solve problems together. And that's sort of what you do in consulting. You have a team and you solve a problem together, and you have spirited debates and you talk about frameworks and you develop hypotheses and you gather data to test your hypotheses, and you create presentations and you're challenged and you answer questions. And so these are very like collegiate type pursuits. And so you can do that and get paid for it. So that seemed like a good way to stay in school and solve interesting problems and explore different fields of knowledge deeply. And again, be more like this person that I admired.
Like it reminded me of the word community. You're a people person. You want to do things with people, but I mean, what do you, up till grad school, what are you thinking you're going to pursue? Do you have any kind of big picture view then?
No, I was always in search of a calling, and I did IT and telecommunications before graduate school, not because it was my calling, but because I think I was helpful. I was helpful to the team that I was on. I was helpful again to my clients. So I'm also curious about your characterization of me as a people person. I've always been very introverted and always kind of, I think, focused more on things rather than people. I think gradually maybe I've become more people friendly, but again, it's curious to me that that's how I came across. I certainly see it as
But
a
I mean,
compliment.
it comes across because isn't that what is the main emphasis on your job is communicating with other people. It's not like you sit like you're a painter and you're in a studio and you're just the brush and the canvas and you. Like you have to work with people to do debates. You can't have a debate with not another person. So
Yes, yeah,
that's
no,
why I said that. Yeah.
no, absolutely. I hear it and I see it and I acknowledge it. There is an element of art and science as part of it because you are, engaging with people in pursuit of a particular goal. You're trying to help a
Yeah.
hospital by another hospital, or you're trying to
Yeah.
help a physician group change the way they do customer service or something like that. So there's a specific objective you're trying to get people to do, and they have disagreement about how best to do it. But yes, the hardest part of the job and the best part of the job is the humans that you interact with.
Hardest and best. That's good. Okay, these three questions are for you as a business consultant, and then we'll jump into James Joyce and apply them there. A screenwriting teacher at the University of Michigan actually told me a great art is when you can clearly see the intention of the maker. Stanley Kubrick says the opposite. Great art is when you can clearly not see the intention of the maker. What role does intention play in your creative process as a business consultant?
I think outcomes and results are more important for us than intention. Uh, the road to hell is also famously paved with good intentions, and so uh, we're ultimately measured by the quality of the outcome that we produce for a client. But understanding their intention is vitally important when multiple people are involved that have slightly misaligned intentions. uh, Trying to get congruence, trying to get alignment across those intentions is one of the hard parts that you have to overcome or include in the work. And intention is always what you come back to when you face a barrier, when you face disagreement, because you may not agree about the means, but you should agree about the ends. You should agree about like where we're trying to get to, what our intent is. And that's always the touchstone. That's the bedrock. That's what you come back to and say, okay, we've hit a wall. Let's retrace our steps. Let's go back to the intention. Are we still in agreement about why we're here? And then we can move forward.
Duchamp said there's no art without an audience. How much are you thinking of your client when you're consulting them?
Mostly that's what I'm thinking about. Mostly I am trying to model in my head how a client might respond to something, how they might perceive something, because what I do is kind of a team sport. We might designate somebody to react as a client might react to something before we actually take it to the client. So we might rehearse and have kind of mock conversations, because ultimately, no matter how good the work product is, if the client doesn't accept it, doesn't see themselves in it, doesn't reflect their intention, it's kind of thrown out. So it has to resonate with the client or it's not helpful.
Again, really great words you're using. Help. McLuhan says everything we invent extends some humanness. Knife and fork extends our teeth. Shutter and a camera extends our eyelid. Maybe even non-tangible, say religion or philosophy, extends consciousness. Your main tool, let's just say it's called framework. That's kind of what you said. I mean, you can tell me your main tool. What humanness does framework extend?
And one of the oldest human artifacts we have is this petrified bone with tally marks on it.
Yeah,
Tallying things is, one of the oldest human activities, separating apples from oranges.
yeah.
You take a small child and you give them balls and cubes and they will sort them. So yeah, I mean, that's an extension of a human desire to impose order, to find patterns and kind of act upon the patterns.
Pattern recognition is huge.
Yes.
That was really good. Okay, what's your history with Joyce? You said you got into Pynchon and then you got into Joyce, but where did you get into literature? Did you were you a reader from day one of fiction and you were getting assignments in high school and college to read Joyce, or did you do Joyce on your own outside of schooling?
Uh, Aside, so not from day one, perhaps, but from like probably year 5 or 6 of conscious life, I have been a reader. Um, in college, I did a I was required to take some courses outside of the major, some honors courses. And so I took a class on postmodern detective fiction. And that was, Umberto Eco and Borges and Calvino and Pynchon's The Crying of Lot 49. And that was it. Like once you do that, you're just gone. You're lost to the world. You've taken all the gateway drugs. And so then
Echo, Pynchon, who were the Borges,
Borges, Calvino.
but no, was Joyce in that?
No, no Joyce yet. No,
Okay,
no, we were
okay,
not ready. This is undergrad. We were not
that's
ready for
undergrad. What
Joyce.
what college was that?
This is University of Oklahoma.
Wow. Okay, so then when did Joyce come in?
Joyce came in fairly recently. Joyce maybe came in. So I knew, like I worked on the edges, right? I've read, I think, everything that Pynchon had written, and so you'll pick up a lot of Joyce by osmosis from Pynchon because he was so heavily influenced by him, and kind of recast himself. And
Wait,
I think
Igor, is that documented with Pynchon saying that, or is that theorist saying, "Oh, it's evident Pynchon was influenced by Joyce"? Did Pynchon say that I am influenced by Joyce?
I am fairly well. Pynchon didn't say very much. I think he kind of lets the books speak for
Right,
himself, and then whenever he's saying something about himself, he's usually taking you for a ride, and he is usually kind of myth making
right.
rather than being honest. But I think the scholarship generally agrees
The
that
scholarship says that. Yeah,
yes, the scholarship says that yes, and then I mean all of the habits and ticks, all of the
yeah,
high and low culture in one package.
yeah,
But it's also like, what if Joyce was an engineer who worked for like an avionics company? Like it's a deadly combination of somebody who's hyper erudite, but also is,
yeah.
a scientist, which Joyce was not in a traditional sense. Uh, but again, I worked on the margin, was Melville and others, and then uh, one of the folks that I think influenced a lot of the people, for example, in our Ukrainian Joyce reading group, there's a Armenian blogger and podcaster who maybe 5 years ago did a series on Ulysses, and he did episodes in each chapter, on each section, and I sort of read along Ulysses with him because he was such a great guide to
That's
Ulysses.
where you started with Ulysses.
Yes.
What's the guy's name?
Um, his first name is Armin, and his last name is Zakarian.
Okay, so yeah, turn me on to him. I'd love to do a podcast with him. But anyways, so then you get into Ulysses,
Yes.
and then you go from Ulysses to the Wake, or did you do other Joyce?
I mean, I've read other Joyce in between, but while reading Ulysses, I saw an article about a Finnegan's Wake group. And of course, when I'm reading Ulysses, I'm like, this is the hardest thing anyone has like written or read ever. Like, this is it. I've reached the pinnacle. I've done the hard thing. And then, then you realize that there's like another door. And I read this article about this reading group in LA that had been reading Finnegan's Wake for 20 years, and mentioned you, of course. And I sent it to a friend of mine who's living in Ukraine, and who was also listening to these podcasts and was also enjoying Ulysses. And I said, "Look at these crazy people! Like, we
What,
think
what, what
we're."
friend? What's the friend you sent it to?
So that was Linda. You interviewed
Yeah,
her
Linda. Linda is
some months
amazing.
ago.
No, she
Yeah.
is amazing. Yeah. So then you and her said, let's start the group, or she said?
She and a friend of ours named Sasha decided to start the group, and invited me as another person who was crazy enough to do
Yeah.
something like this.
So you were the three founders, Linda, Sasha, and you, basically.
I was perhaps slightly later. They were.
Yeah.
I would say that they were the two co-founders, and I was,
Yeah.
let's say, employee number three, as they say in the
Yeah.
startups, when you count what your number
Right,
is.
number three. Okay, now we'll get into this, Joyce and Wake. Now, just on those three questions, same question. Screenwriter says, well, it's basically what do you think Joyce what role did intention play in Joyce's creative process writing The Wake? Just writing in general. What do you think Joyce's intention is?
So I certainly feel like he had an intention, and because the power and the level of willpower required to spend your life ingesting and kind of collecting information, which we've talked about earlier today, and then digesting it and crafting this construct of Finnegan's Wake, it has to be driven by some design, by some intent, by some motivating force that kind of holds it together, because otherwise it would just fall apart instantly, if it didn't have that spine. It is not immediately visible, but I think if his persistence in writing this for decades, it's obsessive, it's maniacal, it's
What's
kind of an
maniacal mean? What's another word for maniacal?
idea fix. It's a fixation. It's a something that's
Compulsive.
pursued. Hmm?
Compulsive.
Yeah, it is compulsive, except compulsive can kind of come in spurts, and you're compelled, and then you're not compelled. This is sustained compulsion. This is
Sustained. Yeah, very good.
uh, yes, it's obsessive and
Yeah,
compulsive both,
yeah.
without medicalizing it or pathologizing it. It's an artist who just continues doing it. his intent, I think it is to encapsulate the world. I think it is to achieve immortality. I think it is to represent something that is unrepresentable, does not lend itself to representation, to do things that you have to do when language fails.
Yeah.
And so some of the things you brought up earlier today, he's doing those things. He is changing language because language has failed and is insufficient to convey what he's trying to convey. And
Yeah,
yes,
Gary Snyder, the beat poet, nature poet, said, the poet sees the world without language and then puts that seeing into language. Because it's still, Joyce is still using language. It's language about language. But he's not like painting an abstract painting like Jackson Pollock, because he's still writing sentences in the wake that are very readable.
he is. And he's also creating a soundscape.
Yeah.
So he's painting with sound as
Yeah.
well. And I think that soundtrack is hugely important. And you can't, do the book justice without reading it out loud and without creating the soundscape, which is a bit Pollockian at times because
Yeah.
you have these things you don't know how to pronounce, and
Yeah.
they're the thunder words look like big
You don't,
explosions of paint.
it's interesting. You don't know how to pronounce them. No, you attempt to pronounce them, and there's no correct way, because then people go, people don't in Joyce groups go, oh, you mispronunciated that word. You can't, that's the whole point, is that every person is going to pronounce it their own way. And then you're going to study the words and the syllables more closely and go, I wouldn't have pronounced it that way. So, yeah. Oh, now the next question, you covered that, Igor, and we'll go full circle on this. How much was Joyce thinking of his reader when he was writing his book?
I think he was imagining a better sort of reader. I think he was hoping for a better sort of reader. I'm not sure he felt particularly well served by his current readers. They have not rewarded him with, I think, all the acclaim that he felt entitled to. They did not recognize him, I think, during his lifetime as the greatest living writer that has ever been or ever will be, which he felt, I think, entitled to. They've tried to censor him. They've tried to sue him. They've tried to criticize. They've dared to criticize him. And so I think he was hoping for that perfect reader, was a perfect insomnia that would just attend to his every word, and analyze it and appreciate it. And I think he kind of got his wish. I think we now have quite a few people around the world doing it justice.
He invented Zoom and disguised it as a book. Really good. So then the extension, what humanness was he extending with his pen or pencil writing the wake? I mean, what the pen or pencil was extending, what humanness for Joyce?
I think the most obvious kind of surface level answer is the dream and the act of dreaming that is so ubiquitous that you don't need to have a PhD to dream. That the most kind of simple ones of us are still able to do it and manage to do it pretty much every day, but we have a hard time understanding what this miraculous thing is that happens to us every day and what happens to us while we're in it and what it all means. And so it's something that is at once very ubiquitous and basic and fundamental, and at the same time very ineffable. And so he's trying to F it.
What do you think he meant by epiphany and everydayness? What's that mean to you?
Well, he does it with language. In the things he does with words make you stop and really read that word again and think about all the different meanings that could be encoded in it. And that's one way he creates those mini epiphanies. Was he calls them wedge words. It's like a wedge that's been created, inserted into this wall of thought, and that's kind of uninterrupted. And so he puts a wedge in and makes you rethink things. So that is one way he creates these epiphanies of everydayness. And I think it's in some ways some connection to mindfulness and being in the moment. Uh, One of the other instructors I have, one of the other martial arts instructors I have, says that there are no ordinary moments.
Yeah.
And it's, very inspiring. And to him, it probably just means that there could be like a ninja waiting to attack you. And so you need to be ready at any
Yeah.
moment. But there's a, larger truth here around uh, each moment, at least creating the potential for an epiphany. And we have the potential of noticing it and unlocking it. And it may be quite exhausting to have an epiphany every moment, but we do miss out on a lot. And the wake is a cheap way to have 100 epiphanies in 100 moments just by reading through a page.
I like that cheap way. It's like the amazing thing with Joyce is you can buy one of his books for, $1 or $5, but you can buy one of them for $1 million because it's signed by him and it's a first edition. How many products on the face of the earth have ever had that sort of range, that the same content can be a penny or $1 million? That's a pretty amazing phenomenon, I think. Anyways, how much, this is a stupid question, but how much percentage do you get the wake, and how much percentage did Joyce get the wake?
I think he got 150% of it.
Wow, no
I
one
think
said
he,
that.
well, because he also had all the drafts and all the notebooks and all the precursors and all the thoughts, and I think he edited it. This doesn't always feel like it was edited by anyone, but I do think
Yeah,
that he edited and trimmed and taken things out, which is why I'm giving him more than like what is on the page,
yeah.
more than what's in the book, and all the
Oh,
kind
I
of
like
emotional
that.
resonances.
Yeah. Now how much percentage do you get it?
Single digits, you know, on a good day when a page is really flowing, I might feel like I'm getting 10%.
Yeah,
It's
because
I've described it to my fellow group members as climbing, where you kind of look at a sheer wall and it looks just impenetrable, but then maybe you see like a crack and you stick your fingers in it and
yeah,
there's another one, and you
yeah,
just kind of start making your way up. So you're just looking for these little cracks to access what's going on, and it's enough to kind of traverse it. And then you
yeah,
read it out loud and you get a little bit of the music of it. And that's entirely enough.
yeah. But you're being humble, because I think if you're in a Finnegan's Wake reading group, you're already getting it 80%. I mean, come on. You don't go, well, I'll try it once and then you quit. That's all right. You can do that. I know people who do that. I tried it once and it didn't appeal to them. But if you're there and continuing, that's the whole thing, I think. Now let's go back to that thing you taught me. No ordinary moment.
Moments.
Yeah. Ellman said we are learning to be Joyce's contemporaries. Now, just your thoughts on what Ellman was saying there, because one way it reminds me of what I learned from Frank Zappa, who claimed Joyce to be an influence. In both Joyce and Zappa said, all times are happening now. That's called all at onceness. So that's a much like the uh, Eastern philosophy dudes like Ram Dass, be here now, live in the moment. So your thoughts on that just expand. How does it resonate to you? We are learning to be Joyce's contemporaries, to learning to be living in Joyce's time, or learning to be living in all times are happening now, or whatever.
I think in the sense that Joyce is of his time, but also is timeless.
Yeah.
If we can learn to be more timeless, that would be a good thing. And so
Yeah.
we should try to be Joyce's contemporaries in his timelessness. And he is, Doctor Who, Time Lord, traveling across timelines. Like, if we can be more like that, that's great. I
Yeah.
don't necessarily think we need to be his contemporaries in his time. I think it is reading the book forces you to be more of his contemporary by trying to understand the context. And so we try to study Irish history. We try to study current events. We try to understand what he was reading in his newspapers and listening to on the radio and what magazines he was reading. And I think that's very helpful. I think it's helpful to, I think at the remote, we also tend to idealize people, and people do idealize Joyce and fetishize them and heroicize him. And I think his contemporaries perhaps were more attuned to like what a pain in the ass he was. And I think that's also an important point of view to maintain. He was human. Nothing human was alien to him. He was occasionally vindictive, and um, there are certain things he was ignorant of, and he was not omniscient and omnipotent. And so, no man is a hero to his butler. And so sometimes we want to be Joyce's butler and see him as a human being,
Yeah.
and not just as this kind of thing that we place all of our hopes and dreams and aspirations into. So I think there's many ways of being his contemporary. All are positive.
It's really good. Igor, it's fun talking with you because Kurt Schwitters, you know this artist?
No,
Check him
I
out.
don't know.
Check him out. He's a heavy dude. Merz art, MERZ art. He said every period must redeem itself because it suffers in itself alone. So it's sort of like, how much does the time dictate who Joyce is? And I mean, we could just jump to the question. Cecil Taylor, the great jazz pianist, says, I'm just a vehicle and this stuff just comes through me. Is art making, writing, more self expression, or more you're a vehicle for whatever technologies, cultures, and environments are dominant?
So I think we've touched a couple of times on this notion that artists have this antenna that they pick
Yeah.
something up, something in the ether, and then they kind of rebroadcast it and they retranslate it.
Yeah.
And I think it's an incomplete explanation of what they do, an incomplete description of what an artist does. I think there's a tremendous amount of hard work that is piled on top of picking up this transmission. I don't think it's just you sit down and write.
Yeah.
Certainly having tried to write, it doesn't work that way. I think it's Stendhal that said that when you're writing a poem, one line is from God and the rest you have to do yourself. And I'm very
Who, who,
much,
who
I
said
think
that?
it's Stendhal.
Oh, Stendhal said that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure that's who said it. And so, yeah, so one line is from God and the rest you have to write yourself. And I
Yeah.
think it's more like that, where you get moments of inspiration, you get some sharp, incisive thing, a different angle through which to view the world. But
Yeah.
then you have to fill in the blanks. And whether it's an act of translation from
Yeah.
divine to human, where you have to dumb it down a little bit, or whether it's coding it into to make the pill easier to swallow, or wrapping it into a story shape that humans are used to. But there's other stuff that the writer does, and that other stuff is a tremendous amount of work that has to be added, and a tremendous amount of discipline and craft that
Yeah.
has to go into the work.
Yeah. Because our group now is 30 years reading the Wake, and I constantly say, It doesn't matter. We could be reading People magazine. It's just a reflection of who attends. And people go, no, the Wake's better than People magazine. So, no, it's not. but I love that because Dante, that Stendhal quote was great because Dante said he prayed to the muse to help him write, you know. And dude, he's up there with Joyce as one of the greatest writers. Okay, can art making, writing be egoless?
Yes, but then it's not particularly good because we now have these large language models. We have artificial intelligence that writes. You can give it a prompt and it will write things, and it has no ego. And I think the lack of ego, and ego is a point of view. The lack of that point of view, I think, deprives of writing of something that's very important.
Really great. Two things. I've asked that question for so many years. Can art making be egoless? 90% go no. And then one lady said, great art is egoless. And you just said the opposite. No. And you said no. And you put in the language model situation. So that shows you the span right there. Because, you know, Joyce said, I didn't write Finnegan's Wake. The people at the coffee house. In fact, he's being influenced by Duchamp, who changed art forever, ruined art forever. Thank God it needed ruining. And he said, Duchamp said, the artists of the future will only have to point. So that's what Joyce was doing. He was just pointing at things and putting them in. But, you know, he was a craftsman, which is a word you use beautifully. But when you said ego is a point of view, I'm going to use that. That's really good, Igor, because McLuhan said, understanding is not having a point of view. Now, most of us think, oh, I love Facebook or I hate Facebook. You have a bias. But in essence, when you're with one or more people, you shouldn't really say you love or hate it. You should just kind of suss out how is it shaping our behavior. Because, you know, I don't do Facebook, but it shapes my behavior. I live in a Facebook world. You can't escape it. You
That's
know.
right. That's right. By the way, you mentioned pointing and Joyce saying that he is merely pointing. Merely pointing is a very, very important act because art in some ways is about attention. And so drawing attention to something is one of the highest purposes of art. So he
Yeah.
is selling himself short, but even merely pointing is extremely valuable. I bring to this conversation an economic point of view, which is there are certainly great works of art that have been created by people who don't have a strong ego,
Yeah.
but it is very likely that we have never seen those great pieces of art because the art that survives and is propagated and replicated and distributed is an art that was promoted. It is an art that was exhibited. It is an art that was commissioned. It was an art that was patronized. That's the art that survives. And so maybe there's somebody toiling in obscurity and lacks an ego and is creating masterpieces. We just like won't see them because they don't know how to get a gallery show or how to get a book deal.
Yeah.
Uh,
It's funny you said both those words. Do you know the artist Henry Darger? D A.
yes,
Yeah, dude,
yes.
he wrote the longest books in the history of the world, and he was a great watercolor painter. And New York Times claimed that he was pop art way before pop art because he was cutting out pictures of Joe Namath out of the newspaper and slapping them on his book. You know, he was using advertising in his paintings, but not even copying them. He just literally pasted them, doing collage. So was he egoless? And you know, if you watch the movie on Henry Darger, they say in it the most amazing line I think is, how could these people not know he was making art? He lived in an apartment building. So, anyways, they put him in a hospital to die, or hospice care. And somebody goes into his apartment and sees all this art. And they go to Henry and they go, dude, why didn't you tell us? And he goes, it's too late now. Now you can't. I asked the producer of the film, people don't know how to interpret that, but it's too late now. I wanted it all destroyed. I didn't want anyone to see this. Or it's too late now because you motherfuckers are going to make a gazillion dollars off of me and I ain't going to get a penny, or there's a million other ways to interpret it's too late now, you know.
That's right. That's right. And when we were talking earlier, I was thinking of Henry Darger when we were talking earlier about kind of Joyce working on the wake for decades. And that could have happened to Joyce. Like if
Yeah,
Joyce didn't hustle and he wasn't
yeah,
fortunate enough to have Sylvia Beach and other people around him, that could have been another masterpiece
yeah,
that, you know, languishes in obscurity. And the Darger thing was kind of an accident that it was discovered. And how
yeah,
many others are there that were lost, not because they were deliberately destroyed
yeah,
in wars and fires and so forth, but just, you know, toiling in obscurity.
yeah. It's a really good point, Igor, because I've studied do you know this artist in LA? His name is Simon Rodia. He was a short little Italian guy and he made these things called the Watts Towers for
Hmm.
33 years. It's really the greatest piece of art ever created on the face of the earth by one human, except maybe Finnegan's Wake. But Finnegan's Wake's a book. This is physical. So, Gaudi, the architect in Spain?
Yes.
It's like this guy did Gaudi one person. You can see the Watts Towers and see Gaudi, and you see the relationship. Well, both Gaudi and Simon are what's called visionary artists. They're not just adding, like a lot of the outsider artists, which they shoved Henry Darger into, is they're just adding and adding and adding. And back to that compulsion, they're compulsive artists. People who are locked up in jail, all the stuff that Jean Dubuffet found when he discovered what outsider art was. That's called folk art. That's the process of adding, adding, adding. But I think Joyce, Simon, they had a vision in the beginning, and it was a process of an adding and adding for 17 years in terms of Joyce, and over 30 years in terms of Simon. They had this vision because when Simon was done, he goes, okay, I'm done. And he just left. And he didn't go, dude, charge $5 for everybody who comes and sees this and, cut me back some. He just left. And that's the proof that he accomplished his vision. I mean, it's not the proof, but that's what some theorize. So I think Joyce is a visionary artist. He knew what he was doing, but you could say it was this just list making, or you know,
Now it's a geological accretion of things.
yeah,
And he kind of tells you in the wake that there's a letter and it's in this
yeah,
the bottom of this midden heap, and
yeah,
there's layers and layers of history and
yeah,
geology and wars and ruins above and beyond it, and then an earthquake comes and sort of stirs it all up. Yeah, I think we agree that great artistry benefits from a vision,
yeah,
and that may be necessary. It may not be sufficient for that art to also be seen and recognized. And not,
yeah,
I love reading about Michelangelo, and he's in his 80s and he's working on a bunch of different projects, including the Sistine Chapel and the Vatican. And every day he goes to the work site and he supervises the work site, St. Paul's Cathedral, and he is focusing on the sculpture. His work is focusing on the architecture. He's running calculations on how much they have to feed the mules that are carrying marble blocks up these ramps, and then what to do with all the shit that the mules are producing as an output of the work. And then every day he's visiting the Pope to reconfirm that, yeah, we're still building this thing. This is our vision. Remember, we're building this. The popes keep dying. So he has to keep going to the new Pope and explain the vision again. And this is the greatest at the time, greatest artist in the world, acknowledged by everyone.
Yeah.
And still every day he has to go and get the humans aligned to like, remember, we're doing this. And you, the Pope, will be dead soon. And I, Michelangelo, will be dead soon. But we got to build this cathedral, and the vision has to survive. And if he was merely the greatest artist, those things wouldn't have gotten done if he hadn't gone and done all that hand holding and schmoozing was the Pope.
Dude, you really nailed it because yeah, it's a joke. He did the highbrow work and he did the shit work.
Yeah, no, quite literally.
Yeah,
And
because
he
I
had,
mean,
yeah, and he had to build some new tools, like him, Brunelleschi, to build the cathedral in Florence. He had to invent new tools, like things didn't exist. Like that was really the time when you had new problems and they required completely new tools.
yeah, it's like, do you know the joke about the kid? He's given a pony for his birthday gift, and the dad says it's in that room, and the room is filled with shit. And the kid's like, "There's a pony in here somewhere." I mean, I didn't I paraphrased it bad, but at least you got a chuckle out of a little.
Yeah,
But
no, that's
but
spot on.
it's also Joyce saying you use shit. Doesn't he draw on his skin with shit in the wake? You know, or he anyways, the funny thing about shit is that it's fertilizer and it makes things grow.
Correct.
So it's
Correct.
got this double it's like all things. They have services and disservices. But here's the heavy one you said was Gaudi making these amazing towers in Spain, highbrow architect, like equal to Michelangelo in a way. You know, he's respected. He dressed in workers' clothes. So he's going to work and he gets hit by a bus and they don't think he's important. So they take him to the poor people's hospital and he dies. And they're like, "Oh shit, didn't you know that was Gaudi? You should have taken him to the rich people's hospital." It's not funny, but we got to laugh, I guess.
Well, but even, through his life and death, he still creates an insight and makes people re-examine their assumptions. So that's
Yeah.
an act of an artist as well.
Yeah. No, it's amazing. So here's a line from Portrait of an Artist as a Young Man. I will try to express myself in some mode of life or art as freely as I can and as wholly as I can, using for my defense the only arms I allow myself to use: silence, exile, and cutting. Now, the first thing I love about that line is using only my arms. And that is Joyce learning probably from Whitman that everything we invent extends some humanness. You know, that's what McLuhan said. Technology is the most human thing. So people want to say, "Oh no, I'm overwhelmed by technology." And it's just like anything humans invent can be called media, technology, whatever you want to call it, but it extends some humanness. So, we got to deal with it. So, Igor, I'm curious your thoughts on that line, especially what does silence, exile, and cunning mean to you? And what do you think it meant to Joyce?
So first of all, the use of arms reminds me a little bit of uh, Hamlet's soliloquy about taking arms against the sea of troubles. And certainly Joyce is constantly comparing himself to Shakespeare. I think young Stephen is very interested in Shakespeare. So the dialogue with Hamlet and others is ongoing. Uh, I think Joyce succeeded maybe a third of the way. I think he certainly used exile as one of his arms, as one of his methods. He reminds you of his exile status. He's an exile in many ways, not just kind of a geographical, political exile, but he is exiled from time and not just space. We talked about him kind of being timeless. I don't think he did a very good job of being silent. That was not his way. And I think he was partially cunning. I think he was somewhat cunning, but had he been more cunning, he probably would have had greater financial success, probably greater circulation during his lifetime, probably a much bigger launch for Finnegan's Wake. So I think he certainly employed those three strategies, let's say, but to differing degrees of success.
Yeah, really well put. You taught me a lot there. I appreciate that. And you know, the exile one is, it's sort of like McLuhan being a Canadian. He could observe American culture better being one step removed. So it's like, did Joyce ever leave Dublin? No, Dublin was in his blood forever and ever. So he didn't really leave it, but physically he felt maybe I should go away, you know. And but what does the word cunning mean to you there? What is, because you said he's partially cunning, and I'm just curious, him saying that word cunning, what, suss that out. What do you think he's saying that word means?
I think historically cunning, I think now it probably has more negative connotations, but I don't think it's always been quite that way. In fact, I think in Shakespeare we'll have references to low cunning, suggesting that there's also a high cunning. So you can be clever and strategic in achieving of your goals, and you can devise stratagems. You can play kind of multi-step chess combinations. And so cunning is kind of the opposite of the frontal assault. Cunning is undermining, digging under the castle. It's, blockading it. It's oblique strategies, as Brian Eno would say. They're indirect approaches to achieving your objectives.
That's funny. Oblique strategies. I gotta look that up because
Oblique strategy. Yeah, he had a deck of cards. If you're looking him up, Brian Eno, and it was, if you're brainstorming, he had a deck of ideas, and you'd pull out a card, and it'd say, "What if you inverted everything?" And it's like, interesting. Okay, yeah, the problem looks differently if you inverted it.
he got that from McLuhan. Because do you ever see McLuhan's card game?
Yes.
You can see it online, and Eno's huge McLuhan guy. But did you see the Eno doc that came
Yes.
out about a year ago?
Yes.
Because every screening is different. Did you know that?
That I hadn't realized. I thought I was seeing the same thing as everybody else.
No, you were seeing what everybody was seeing for that screening, but then the next screening, they feed some sort of DCP or the film up in the cloud, and then the next screening's a little different. It's edited a little different. I mean, in the history of cinema, that's pretty amazing that every screen, it's very Eno-esque too. Has Eno ever come? Are you a big Eno fan?
I'm a fan. I don't listen to him every day, but
but is he ever mentioned Joyce or Finnegan's Wake?
There are a couple of overlaps. He has made, I think there's some references, and there are some people who are like Robert Anton Wilson, I think maybe that have connected them. We have not discussed him in our group, but as a person who spends a lot of time in airports, music for airports is very much in my rotation.
But I'm saying, did Eno ever? Because I know Eno mentioned McLuhan, and they used it trying to sell Marshall's book on the re-release. Eno said, Marshall McLuhan changed the world with one sentence. It's like, anyways, this was good. I'm glad you brought that up. Oblique strategies. And I asked for 90 minutes. We only got about 5 more minutes. I was wondering if we could do a part two, because there's so many things I want to go into that you're well versed in. And one is, uh, you ever studied Peter Drucker?
Yeah.
And he's quite a character. And he would mention Bucky Fuller and Marshall McLuhan in his books. And I'm curious about that. And then I want to go into what's the difference between art and science, because you brought that up. And then the really big one is the difference in the wake between space, which Decio, he's written a book about the wake. He goes to a lot of the wake meetings. He's from South America. He says space represents the eye and time is represented by the ear. So there's
Interesting.
a lot of things we could go into, and especially just the phenomenon of you guys attending and doing your wake group. For how long have you had the Ukrainian group going?
We just this morning had meeting number 49. We've been at it for 2 years. We're on page 143. So we're
You meet how often?
um every 2 weeks or so.
And that's, you have Lorenzo in there too?
He will join us occasionally. He is
Yeah.
certainly a member of the group, and he'll join and he will introduce his crazy theories. Yes.
I like your word crazy. We got to go in. You want to do a part two? So it could be like 5-6 months down the
I'd be delighted
Okay.
to talk again, Jerry.
Because the crazy line is great. McLuhan's great line is, you can't prove you're sane unless you have discharge papers from a mental hospital.
That is
but,
fair enough. I think
but,
that is a
but,
very reasonable standard.
but
Uh,
why don't we close out, Igor? And it's really been a delight. I appreciate your time and energy. This is another line from Portrait, and I'm curious your thoughts on this one. Welcome, O life. I go to encounter for the millionth time the reality of experience, and to forge in the smithy of my soul the uncreated conscience of my race. I mean, right there, it's like covers everything we've talked about back to soul. But I'm curious, I go to encounter the reality of experience. That the front part is pretty straightforward, but I'm more interested in your thoughts on to forge in the smithy of my soul the uncreated conscience of my race. What do you think that's about?
uh, one of the David Mamet movies, Ricky Jay's character encounters somebody and he says, "Hey, it's a good day for a race." And they ask him, "What race?" He says, "The human race." And so that's this notion of Joyce going after nothing less but then created consciousness of his race. First of all, I think it is the human race and not just the Irish race. And
Yeah.
then to me, the operative word here is uncreated. He is looking for something real, not artificial, source level, not interpreted, kind of straight from the source without any intermediaries or add ons, perhaps that language imposes. He is looking for territory, not the map. He's trying to tap into that realness. And it takes an effort. It takes an effort to dig past the layers of language and kind of accumulated prejudices and interpretations and rules of thumb to get to what is real. And I think that's what he's trying to get to. He's trying to get to that everyday epiphany, to something that is real and ineffable, that is in human hearts, and then convey it to us somehow, which again does require again the use of language and does require again the use of these artifices and devices and tools. So he's setting quite a task for himself, as he's leaving opening his door into the world and stepping out and going about his task.
What's the conscious? What a word. C-O-N and then science, conscience. What is the conscience of my race? I like you went into uncreated. That was deep. But what does he mean by conscious? The ability.
Maybe it's,
Yeah.
again, maybe it's the dreaming. Maybe it's
Oh,
the place where we're all together and where we're slightly unconscious, but we're a little bit conscious. And there are a lot fewer artifices. And again, we're not pretending, we're not wearing a lot of clothes, we're not watching what's coming out of our mouths. We're, talking in our sleep, and he's trying to tap into that conscious and conscious, and something perhaps that is primal, that perhaps even precedes the creation myth and Adam and Eve, and maybe existed even prior to that river that may have been flowing before the humans infested the Garden of Eden.
yeah. A couple things. There's uh, McLuhan interpreted he sort of broke the Finnegan's Wake code by saying everybody dreams while they're sleeping, but artists dream while they're awake. And it's not to sound elitist, but Joseph Beuys, this artist?
Mm-hmm.
Do you know he wrote a whole chapter to Finnegan's Wake by himself? He goes, I can do this. So he write another chapter, and he's the one that says everybody's an artist, So we're all, that's a commonality. All humans dream. They might not be able to express it, and then another bonus question really quick is New Yorker magazine had an article about can babies dream inside the womb, or do you have to have experience to be able to dream? So, just your hunch. Is a baby dreaming inside the womb, or does it come out and have experience and then's able to dream?
I do think you need to have some external stimuli. And so, to the extent the baby inside the womb is happy and knows no lack and is kind of content and at peace and in balance, it perhaps has no need to dream, that has no experiences to process, no, again, needs to sublimate. And only once it becomes, comes into sharp contact with reality and is disappointed, then it needs to resort to dreaming as a coping strategy. So
Wow, do you know what? No one says that. When I ask that question, everybody goes, yeah, they're probably dreaming inside the womb. And it's like, Frank Lloyd Wright's mom put up pictures of buildings when he was in the womb because she wanted him to become an architect. So did the picture seep through her walls of her skin, or did it just her thinking about it go in, or she was just idealistic thinking he'll become an architect and raised him that way? But it is a phenomenon, because if you can't expect a baby to come out of the womb and go, dude, you wouldn't believe what I dreamt last night, because they can't talk yet, So how, 3 years ago when I came out, I was dreaming this inside the womb. It's like Robin Williams calls it womb service.
that's a great one.
Two more really quick ones is this guy, Bill Kennedy. He ran Finnegan's Wake Group in Ohio for many years. He's one of the best Joyceans I've ever heard speak. And he specifically says, don't read all the books about Finnegan's Wake, just read it out loud. And it's amazing because he knows all these important things because he read a lot of those books. But he's saying, as the consumer of the wake, don't worry about that. But most of us, like most of you guys, probably get these books that try to explain Finnegan's Wake, or you use Fweet, or you use Roland McHugh, and you don't want to deny that there's been a lot of great people who have delve deep into the wake and can reveal things to you. But it is that phenomenon is like the whole point of the wake is to read out loud with a group of people, not to explain it.
That's right. That's right. And I think one approach we've taken is, yeah, we read the sources and the great, we honor the masters.
Yeah,
But we try to be a creative and creative in
yeah,
addition to just consuming. So
yeah.
we consume obviously wake, but we try to produce something as well. And so we have the mind maps that Linda creates, and that's how she makes sense of it. I
Yeah.
make these matrices, these frameworks for each of the chapter that we
Oh, you're
read.
the Matrix guy. Oh, that's cool. See, that will get into part two because I think that's what great art does. It fucks your shit up and makes you do. I can do that. So people who just consume the wake and it doesn't take them. It's like Perec, Olipo movement, the manual for living. These people, like, that's what Joyce created, is create a manual for living. But lastly, do you know Sam Sloat? This guy, he wrote
Yes.
how James, he's like, I think one of the premier Joyce Wakians, and he loves this line, which I always get backwards and forwards. He says the wake is first we fall, then we feel, or maybe it's first we feel, then we fall. It doesn't matter which way it goes, but it is a straightforward sentence. There's no gobbledygook in it.
Right on. Right on. Well, I think we've set up the sequel. We've set up the, people can tune into part two to learn about what's inside the matrix.
Really cool. Yeah, you mean the Matrix? Uh, at the Black Lives Matter movement I was at, once I saw a T-shirt and it says "The Matrix is a documentary." Have you ever seen that T-shirt?
I have. There are a lot of things that we thought were grotesque satires and like exaggerated, Brazil, whatever it is, that seemed to be, a parody, and surely we're exaggerating. And like, nope, it's real,
But
and we can't
you mean
even.
Brazil, the Terry Gilliam
Terry
movie?
Gilliam movie,
Yeah,
yes, yes.
because the Matrix. Who's the star of the Matrix? What's his name?
Keanu Reeves,
He came into this bookstore I was working at when that movie came out, and he bought every McLuhan book
amazing,
because
amazing.
they yeah. Go ahead.
He recently wrote a book himself. He co-authored with, it was this guy China Melville, who's Herman Melville's like grandsons. He's a great science fiction writer, but Keanu Reeves co-wrote a book, so he's also now a published author.
Oh, great. That's good to know. I gotta put that down. Okay, Igor, I'm gonna hit the stop button now, but I hope this never ends and we can keep talking forever and ever. Really fun. I appreciate your time and energy. See you later.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah.